For nearly 6 decades, the Gnassingbé family has ruled Togo. First, it was the iron-fisted General Gnassingbé Eyadema. Then, his son Faure took the mantle in 2005, ushering in another generation of dynastic power. But now, the people of Togo, especially its youth, are saying, enough is enough. What started as murmurs of dissent has erupted into a nationwide uprising. Students, graduates, market women, and civil servants are rising up. The streets of Lomé and Sokode are ablaze with protest. At the center of it all, a controversial constitutional reform that transformed Faure Gnassingbé from president to de facto monarch. And in the background, one name keeps echoing: Ibrahim Traoré, a voice of revolution, a symbol of defiance, and to many, a blueprint for how Africa can finally reclaim its power from self-serving elites. Let's dive into the story of Togo's awakening, a nation held hostage by a family legacy, and how a new generation is daring to dream of a different future. The story begins in 1967, when Gnassingbé Eyadema, a military officer, staged a coup and became president. For 38 years, he ruled with a mix of charisma and brutal repression. He changed the constitution, suppressed the opposition, and created a cult of personality that painted him as the father of the nation. His face was on billboards, his speeches broadcast daily, and his critics silenced. When Eyadema died in 2005, the military moved swiftly to install his son, Faure Gnassingbé, as president. This was a direct violation of the Constitution, but the National Assembly bent the rules to make it legal, a sign of how deep the family's control ran. Faure initially presented himself as a reformer, the modern face of Togo. He spoke of democracy, growth, and progress. But behind the scenes, the same old tactics continued: rigged elections, jailed opponents, and the crushing of dissent. Fast forward to 2024, and Faure pushes a new constitutional change. This time, he eliminates term limits and centralizes power further, effectively making himself ruler for life. To many Togolese, this was the final straw. Across Africa, young people make up over 60% of the population. In Togo, that number is even higher. But for years, this demographic has been unemployed, underrepresented, and unheard. When Faure passed the constitutional overhaul in early 2025, a switch flipped. Students took to the streets. They were quickly joined by unemployed graduates, traders, and even school teachers. The protest chants were loud and clear. 58 years is enough. No to monarchy. Africa is not a kingdom. These weren't isolated outbursts. The protests were coordinated, digitally fueled, and strategically planned. WhatsApp groups, TikTok videos, and Twitter threads spread like wildfire, exposing police brutality and calling for mass mobilization. The government responded with force: tear gas, rubber bullets, mass arrests. But the harder they pushed, the louder the people roared. In the streets of Lomé, graffiti of Traoré's face began to appear. Slogans like, "Be like Traoré," or "Africa must rise" became rallying cries. But who is Ibrahim Traoré? And why has he become the symbol of hope in Togo? Captain Traoré, who seized power in Burkina Faso in 2022, shocked the world. Young, radical, and fiercely patriotic, he spoke the language of the people. He cut ties with foreign exploitation, kicked out French military bases, nationalized key sectors, and pushed for Pan-African unity. To Togolese youth, Traoré represents what their leaders are not: selfless, courageous, and revolutionary. When Faure cemented his rule through constitutional trickery, it was Traoré's earlier warning that echoed: Africa will not move forward with recycled dictators wearing democratic masks. Togo's protesters took those words to heart. They didn't just want Faure gone, they wanted a reset, a return of power to the people. Despite weeks of unrest, regional bodies like ECOWAS and the African Union have remained largely silent, a troubling trend in Africa's politics. The same bodies that rushed to condemn military coups are noticeably quiet when democratic abuse comes from civilian rulers entrenched for decades. Why? Because many of these institutions are filled with leaders who see themselves in Faure. To condemn him would be to expose themselves. Meanwhile, France, Togo's former colonial master, has maintained strategic silence. Faure has long been an ally, and France has interests in maintaining the status quo. Togolese youth see this clearly. That's why many protests have targeted French institutions, accusing them of enabling tyranny. But the people are not waiting for foreign saviors. They are demanding African solutions to African problems. Togo stands at a crossroads. The protests have grown, but so has the government's crackdown. Leaders of the movement have been arrested. Internet blackouts are now common. State media downplays the unrest, branding protesters as foreign puppets. But the streets remain defiant. What happens next is unclear. Will Faure Gnassingbé resign, like Blaise Compaoré in Burkina Faso? Or will he dig in his heels, risking civil war? What is clear is this: a new consciousness has been born in Togo, one that refuses to accept fear as a way of life, one that sees leaders like Traoré not as exceptions, but as possibilities. The youth of Togo are not just fighting for their nation, they are lighting a match for the entire continent. From Kinshasa to Nairobi, from Lagos to Addis Ababa, people are watching, waiting, hoping. And the question remains, will Africa finally break free from the chains of its post-independence rulers? Or will the cycle of recycled leadership continue? This is more than just politics, it's a generational reckoning. And whether or not Faure Gnassingbé falls, the spirit of the Togolese youth has already risen. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.